So this is the meeting to talk about housing, community character stuff, which is, I mean, a lot of things. Usually, a meeting like this will be, we'll talk about architectural styles they like. They'll talk about types of housing that is needed or that they like or they have or things they don't want to see. So kind of anything goes, like the other meetings have been thus far today. But we'll start off with an introduction. So I'm Brian Wright, Principal of Town Planning and Urban Collaborative, leading team of consultants, planners, engineers, designers, landscape architects, and artists. So for those who haven't been to any of these meetings so far, you're working real time, so we hear noises banging around and the shop owners and stuff. Pencil to paper. Yeah, yeah. No, I can no longer say we haven't put pencil to paper yet. So let's see. Yeah, let's go around the introduction.
Kevin Anderson, Southeastern Area.
Pat Bailey, I'm from Birmingham. I'm an interior designer. Clay Ragsdale, I work for J Medical Construction as a designer. Sarah Dura. I'm Mary Smith. I work with J Medical.
Trey Hamlin.
Manifold, head of design, and I brought my team.
That's Nicole and Josh Mander, landowner. Neighbors. Clark Bailey, North.
Ryan Hudson, landscape architect, TPDs. Joshua Walneck, neighbor.
Amy Wood, John Wood, landowner.
Lee Cook, landowner.
I would say landowner, but my parents aren't. So.
Yeah, that counts.
Future. Hopefully.
Installer, Southeastern Area. I'm Mike Dillard.
All right. So these meetings are pretty freeform. Here to pick y'all's brains, to learn things. Sometimes we go on tangents. That's okay. Talking about transportation and the housing meetings, we'll try to keep it on track as best we can. So what do we need here? What's missing housing wise? We heard at the opening presentation a couple of things. Some people said nothing but single family, and specifically said no townhouses, and somebody else said townhouses. And I don't think that they meant all townhouses, but the idea was maybe have some. So usually in those who are discussions, we're talking about doing an neighborhood here, cluster, conservation subdivision, so grouping the development areas, 50% conservation elsewhere. Typically, when you do a project like this, you're going to walkable village. And usually, in most walkable villages, they aren't exclusively large lot single family homes. And so we've talked about the idea already of doing a range of sizes of single family homes at least. Now, kind of hearing that there may be interest in doing some other stuff as well. Just wanted to sort of get some guardrails around that and see appetites for that. How much of that, if it's okay, what makes it okay versus not okay, and that stuff. So maybe we'll start off there. Sort of that's that to know. Meeting. Do they have any thoughts?
That being developed is going to approve, you're saying what you want to put out there for. Obviously, I love the idea of multi-generational. And that there's properties that accommodate multiple generations. As we see a tremendous demand in our workplace for people to have a place for mom and dad not to be too far away. But mom and dad don't want the, 4,000 square foot house that they raise their children in because they can't maintain that. So to be able to have an opportunity, I feel like for families to exist cohesively, beautifully is like something that I think is
Sometimes in that multi-generational discussion too, we'll talk about the idea that even though today you may think it's awesome to have a 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square foot house, at some point you may go, I'm not really feeling that. Take care of that. I don't want to do the stairs, whatever. So we see people all over the place downsizing. So in many places, most places, in fact, if you change your preference or needs for housing, you have to leave. You have to leave your neighborhood because most developments are a lot of this size, a house of this size, repeated, even if architecture is different. And so you can't stay in the same neighborhood, which is pushing. And like what we're talking about would be tragic. You had this amazing experience, and now you've got to go like live or go home just because we don't offer something to the downside of the generation. What else?
I'll echo that, but I think so many people have a hesitation, like, it's not done well. So they're afraid of townhomes, they're afraid of smart homes. They see that it's not aesthetically pleasing or not in a functional way, but I don't believe that's most. So I'll echo that. I think that's a wonderful thing to have planned and integrated well.
That's a great point. Yeah, so often you hear about townhouses. Where's the town, right? They're just over in these little suburbs or whatever, and they group of townhouses or a whole development of all townhouses. And it may be fine for a certain stage of your life, but probably no one's going to like check out this really cool townhouse development. Usually, in a more rural setting like this, especially in an neighborhood, if you had a mix of housing types, or just exclusively single family, you would have a few of these other things, but not a lot. And usually there would be sort of oriented around sort of a neighborhood, civic space, park, or whatever, because you want a little bit more density in those neighborhood areas so that more people are out there hanging out, finding eyes on the street, safe stuff. Typically wouldn't be predominant. I think the way that I was talking in the opening presentation about this lot width restriction we have, 50 feet minimum, but apparently they count, I think, on a lot. So it's like, I'm not sure. So I don't even know if we can do townhouses, but after hearing it last night.
It's more like a building structure.
Yeah, the building and yes. So, they have the sheer wall, they're patched, but the city counts it as.
There is a desire to see, of course, all custom, the walking builder.
Amen.
We're doing all custom. And so, I also want to see character to these smaller homes that is equally, aesthetically pleasing as to the larger. It needs to, the character needs to be, there needs to be a wow and it's not necessarily cheap because it's small, because we're not gonna, do anything with this. But I'm imagining smaller for some, but the character and the aesthetics would be the design.
And I think each grouping of townhouses should be slightly different. And so often it's townhouse after townhouse after townhouse. It's just cookie cutter. Yeah. So for them to each have their own individual character and quality would make it more varied. Yeah. Also, smaller groupings of townhouses. Maybe not just one big street, but centered around blocks. Right?
Kind of brownstone look that you see A lot of older cities would be really nice. I think what you're coming to is the material choice.
Even.
You know, I
design
personally am
elements,
like
too.
tired of white houses. Everyone's building a white house, or in Auburn, want to pretend that they live at the beach. And I'm over that. I would like to see homes that are being built like a country style home, front porches.
That was the question I had. We live in a community that everyone lives on their front porch. And that's how we live. But how does this community live? And I know it's bigger lots, but is there a desire for front porch for this? Or do you think that people are gonna wanna like be on the back porch?
It could be a mix. I think it depends on where the house is. If you're on one of these houses, there's gonna be a variety of lot sizes. If you're on one of the larger lots, maybe you're building a house with a backyard view, backs up to the creek, and your back porch might be your hangout place. But I think for the homes that are gonna be more downtown, that in the town center, so to say, maybe their front porch, or maybe they're all around a little community park. Traditionally, you do see brownstones around the city park. I also- And I also,
Literally brownstones.
yeah, and, I mean, on another topic, I think some kind of ball field would be amazing. I mean, I'm not moving there at my house. I mean, maybe if there was multi-generational, when I'm an old lady and I can, maybe that would be attractive to me, hopefully 30 years or so down the line. But, and if I was gonna move to something like that, I would want it to be a place where my house would also connect me with the larger community, so I don't just sit in the house all day.
That's what I was just thinking about when you were talking about multi-generational. I'm thinking about, okay, we're, I don't know, 75, 80, but you don't need to be in a townhouse, that's stairs. You need to be
Cottages.
more cottages where they're one level.
Yeah, something more like a ranch house, small.
And I think it's
Story.
important to be where they are mixed with all the other generations. That they're checked on.
Yeah, people can walk about 20 years longer than they can or should be driving. So these sort of walkable neighborhoods are magnets for seniors, but also they're magnets for young families. And so it's like in my neighborhood right now, after school, it's like a parade of elderly folks and people with strollers, and they're passing and walking next door to a senior, and they're like, oh, they get to see your kids and wave at them, and then brownies and then your kids. Hopefully, one community we're working on, they had this great idea of doing older benches. So it's like a bench, and like the wise older person could sit on the bench and feel good to talk to them. Brain. Things like that can happen without having. Porches.
Getting away from like home design, but more like community design. Somebody mentioned bike paths last night. I think bike paths, biking walking paths. I've said extension of some kind of sports field, and I don't mean like building like a Duck Sanford, but one grass field where kids can play soccer, baseball, or just community events. That's always a good thing, and I don't think that there is one baseball field down 72, and I don't believe like heading towards the lake. Don't even know if it's one. I think PSA is something I would love to see. Community farm where we can all buy our local produce from and support. What's that thing? Oh, like it's some kind of community center, like just a small, and somebody mentioned that last night. Some kind of community house where people could like a homeschool group to be, maybe even eventually become the nursery. I grew up in a town that had a community center, and you know, we have community centers in Auburn, but they're not. I grew up in a small town. Kids would literally, like, we'd ride our bikes to the community center, hang out there all night. Had games, and you had foosball and ping pong and things like that. It didn't necessarily keep us from getting into trouble, but at least work.
Right, right, right. Well, and along those lines, you know, a lot of times we do like, sort of, call our village hall kind of space, so it's multifunction. And, you know, somebody in the neighborhood wants their artist, they want to teach an art class, so there's a space for their art class to happen. Or, you know, they're doing a, you know, graduation party for a middle school graduation, or smaller scale things. Or, in some cases, you'll see they'll even church places and also grow and incubate in this space. Okay. Adding any other meetings.
I, I think another thing to consider is the, like, how far off the houses are from the street. Like, are they right up next to it, or is there a big yard? Like, are there sidewalks or bike paths between the house and the street, or are those somewhere else?
Yeah, so typically what we'll do is, and the way that we look at designing and laying out the neighborhood is sort of this continuum from nature to the center, right? Whatever center means, it's basically more like village, inland center, whatever. And so there's all the different experiences. So nature is there are no houses. And as you move in, you know, you might start seeing these larger state lots or formats or whatever, and they will be set back quite a distance. As you move closer to the center, closer and closer, until, you know, in the areas that are the most active or most civic, buildings are closest to the street, you know, sidewalks, street trees, those sorts of things as well. But, you know, outside here, for instance, you know, like this is a hamlet or village center, you know, if you think of it that way. And it has sidewalks some places, and not they're kind of meander around the tree, and they're, you know, it's like a subdivision where it's just concrete straight and where they sheet laid it out or whatever. And so, you know, kind of taking into consideration the context where you are in the neighborhood, what the features are, admiring one around the tree outside there, sort of the connection to it all. But what you want to make sure is that kind of your whole time where you're reversing the neighborhood, your experience is always changing. It's exploration around the corner. Getting rid of that monotony, to your point about making townhouses. If you had a townhouse, it's not all the same. Those kind of things. So ultimately, you know, to the layout of the design would determine that the standards that we would include in the submittal. So let's talk about what our street sections are, whatever. And then when it comes to things like the design of the house, whatever, you know, in the architectural standards, you basically say can't repeat the same elevation within, you know, inside the project at all, or you'd say within view of the same house, so you have to be around the block or whatever. So with having it be unique, and I'm glad to hear you say, you know, custom. You guys are interested in doing custom. It's not just in the layout, the fact that we have agriculture, but also architecture.
Types. So I think in rural spaces, you don't often backyard. Yeah, privacy, more privacy. So I think just in planning the neighborhood, about being a place we have to be really intentional about, and I'm not as after the neighborhoods in and after uh, homes are built, but intentional about their goals and how fencing and backyard, and encouraging. I would see for this type of space, green borders where you can, or these type of cutting, but they're having standardized that the privacy or 6 foot privacy encloses community into one family. And then for your ag spaces, having a standardized fence to the entire development that is aesthetic.
It's a little, it's a different mindset, for those subdivisions these days, you see these sort of privacy fences. See anybody, I don't see me in here, something like that, and also for, keeping these vegetation and having programs. Native planting situation, like plants are obscuring to some extent, but you're not like, what I show home improvement, or like looking over the fence and, um,
I just was gonna mention a couple of things that are important to JMC when we build homes, because that'll continue to be important. So like Melissa said, they're all custom homes, right? So we kind of believe like every family is different, every individual is different, so your home is gonna function. So the way that the house is laid out, the elevations, like they will definitely all be different. And then something that's super important as we think about this land specifically is also some continuity between the homes, because JMC does do very custom work. So the houses that we build look vastly different. That's something that I think we're going to balance or hope to balance within this community. While building a custom home, we also don't want it to feel a little disorienting, going a little too far off the scale that way. So that's something we want to balance. And I think the continuity is going to come from using natural resources, rock, brick, wood, like those are going to be the things we would want to see on the exterior of a home. Things that color palettes go with the land, they complement the land. It's not going to be this white house that just sticks out. So those are the things like we already do as builders, and we really want to push that as we kind of step into this. I think it's going to be a little different because it is an neighborhood and we have more, but those principles are still like very strong in what we do. So translates to some of y'all's desires.
And I love Sarah B. Just little like things and prices. It's like, who are we? Oh, who's that? What's that? Yeah, architecturally, I mean, we do. Artists, but right on. But that next to Southern Living, next to road, the White House, you just want to make sure that it is the confusion. I know we run around Southern Europe, like, is that South of France? I don't know, but anyway, like.
yeah, no, Cerebee definitely does have architecturally, it's sort of like, wow, for the most part, they've sort of followed traditional patterns of architecture. Every now and then, somebody got a little exuberant. The thing, the unifying element there in Cerebee is the landscape. If it weren't for the landscape, it would be even more jarring. And so, I think the idea of having materials, the ultimate example of that. And, if you've ever seen one of these village coffee table books, like Cotswolds in England, it's like the stone is the same on every single house, on every building. The roof is the same stone, but you never go like, it's boring. It's the same. And the architectural variety of the buildings is quite different, but the very narrow material palette in that case unifies it all. What you just said would be the broader material palette, which is good, and then also having some parameters, so that we typically in the project we work on, we would have some architects vetted and all that, and so you go like, okay, we have architectural pattern book or architectural standards. And so the designers can, basically start with that. In this case, like you guys decided to figure out together, and knowing that you guys do a bunch of stuff, it's like, okay, well, what do you best at? You know, what y'all's thing? What do you? And so figuring out ways to create standards because development, there needs to be continuity amongst themselves, and even I'm glad to see there's 19 here because if you had just one builder with just one architect, it's impossible for it to not start to feel monotonous, even if we've asked them to do something different. So I always say, like, make sure you divvy it up in your group, a bunch of different people, and don't let them see what the other one's doing. So all of a sudden you reveal it. Oh, I've never thought of that. Choreography, because what we're trying to do is make it feel authentic and organic, and development these days aren't, not just because no one's trying to do it, but because the way we develop today, we do it faster and sort of it's just not one off here, one off there as much. So,
Mentioned Mount Laurel last night, and I think Mount Laurel is a good example for a project like this. Mount Laurel started with that square, that one square that they built. Those are pretty large houses on small footprints. So it's like good sized houses, but not a lot of landscaping for each individual house. Landscaping is more communal. I think that little square that they built, it is actually playing field.
yeah, and it's actually a good example because they have a restrained material palette with a wide variety of architecture in there, and they don't have any sort of moment of, oh, what happened there? They more cohesive.
And it was built around the CSA.
No, my old firm did know well, but I was for my time. But Brian Hudson and I we're supposed to have a reservation on lots in here.
I have friends that were among the first.
Yeah.
And also on design, moving away from just materials, sustainable design with overhangs and natural ways to save energy costs. Overhangs and natural light so that you don't have to keep lights on all day. Overhangs and being mindful of the way the house faces, and I don't remember exactly all the
Color
terminology.
orientation.
But yeah, all the architects think about that.
And even like having narrow houses from a north-south perspective. So you get sunlight from all sides and you don't really have a dark room in the building.
The dark room is nice.
Sometimes, but yeah.
I mean, I like my
So we
bedroom
have
to be.
it's actually interesting in our office.
I mean, my house is designed that literally I could get through the day without ever turning on a light.
That's what I was gonna say. In our office, we're literally like all of a sudden it'll get cloudy. Turn on the lights, and it's just because of the way it's oriented, where we have windows located, the number of windows and all that, and kind of remarkable.
But establishing those standards that the architects follow along the lines, standards.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, great architect, and he calls it original green versus gizmo green. A lot of times we're like, let's incorporate sustainable stuff, their technology and whatever. But original green was what you had to do because you had no other choice. Perish if you didn't do it and you didn't have much of
And to that point, of course, we all know this. You're building a custom home for an individual who has an opinion. Julie likes it dark, you want it light. As the builder, you're going to sit down with them on a consultation. And you're going to find out what's right for them. And then you custom build it for their desires. So you do have to be careful in the architectural review committees, on what you put out as absolutes, because you don't want to take away from the other person. But there's certain things definitely that's critical and important. But Jack is the one that's going to go, and I'm sure Michael knows that you go out and you look at a lot, you look at the land, you look at the terrain, you look at the sun, you say, okay, you realize if you put your house this way, it's going to be glaring in your face. You definitely look at all of the environmental capacities that sustainable is, I would love that.
And sure, maybe it's just like, I mean, I totally hear you. You can't tell
Sure.
somebody how to design a house because they're gonna want the house that they want, but the community can offer up ways for you to save energy, ways for you to be more sustainable and encourage that.
And in the.
Because sometimes
community
people don't even know.
buildings, within the community buildings. And make sure that that is an example of that, the life of.
Yeah, and ultimately, we're, think about a community like this. Any community where you're focused on placemaking, right? You want to have offices, place, and all that. What happens inside the building isn't of much consequence, right? It's whatever. The way that people experience a place is from the outside of the building. So the elevation of the building, a certain amount of glazing, windows, all of that stuff, not having blank walls. So it's like if a homeowner comes in, I'm really into dark, and I'd like to have no windows on the side of my house, and I've got a corner lot. That's the case. You'd be like, I think you may not be a lot kind of person. You don't want windows on the side, and you need to walk. So everybody else is to experience your preference for darkness. And so kind of balancing that, to not worry too much inside. But for instance, if somebody's like, oh, I found this plan on houseplans.com, I want you to do this for me. And in front of the house, in this case, be facing the street, sidewalk, or maybe a park or whatever. And it's like, okay, we've got our pantry here, and we've got our powder room here. So we can't have window there, and a short window there, and all. Who's going to go in front of the house? Those are things that happen back when you more sort of public facing rooms, front rooms where you don't mind having curtains or the blinds all the time. So you have that more sort of transparency from the inside and well, you see life happen. But those are the few things that we think about from the neighborhood design versus architecture, but most everything else is you. So, what else? This will be the shortest meeting in all charrette.
This is a very small detail, but, the trash service maybe is a big deal, like in where we live, we just changed trash. And now there's like blue cans everywhere. And I can't wait till that goes back to having just trash in the alley. There's nothing worse than like driving down this quaint little street and they drop a trash can.
They don't do it from the alley, they do it from the street.
Do it on the street now, and anyway, I just think that's worth thinking about in design, like, does there need to be a designated trash service that goes around? I know we're not, like, just something to jot.
Right, no, that's definitely.
How can the trash?
And that would be
Sandy
too.
has trash can that's buried in
In the
the
ground,
ground.
yeah.
You have
which
to,
is incredible.
I saw the trash can around, I'm like, oh my goodness. that
That's
was
coming.
cool. How many times a day?
It was small, yes.
So you have to adapt.
That point also speaks to like where the houses might be more dense
Yes.
and see in a lot of older neighborhoods where the garage and parking area is in the back, so there's like a little carriageway in the back. So maybe where the houses are more dense, that's what you have where everyone has their parking area or their garage back, or shared carriageway. And that's where the trash pickup happens.
Like in an alley, yeah.
Where they have to back out.
In the rural context, we call it a rear lane, right? And maybe weird sometimes, but quite charming actually get a gravel in the rural. Have that crunching under your tires as you drive, your driveway, your normal. But a lot of kids call it. But it's super cool when you can. And I didn't say this, but
Who does the trash?
Waste management.
Your county or you all?
County.
County
We all
does
pay
provide
the,
it.
we pay the county to pick up now. We used to have a dumpster. We used to all drive our trash.
Yeah.
And that,
I-
that,
I-
that literally changed, but like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago?
I don't know.
That we didn't drop off.
Yeah.
But there's no recycling here.
Okay.
So I drive my recycling.
Trash, plastic trash. My house.
It's the county. We pay the county. We pay the county like $55 quarterly.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
things I didn't say a minute ago, when we were talking about townhouses, is part of the reason why people often don't like them too is in a suburban context, they have the garage on the front, right? And so one of the things that you don't do in a walkable neighborhood is put the garage in front of a house. It's like you can see in a historic neighborhood, to your point, either there's a rear lane or if there's not, because there's a sort of consideration for environmental feature, something you're trying to avoid, then it would drive past the house, driveway past parking back still, even if it's access from the front. So that's huge character, not having garages.
Either like a rear lane or a carriage house kind of.
Oh, speaking of carriage houses, and accessory dwelling units. So, you know, these days, in most places, there's a housing shortage. And one of the things that nearly every place is getting behind is the idea of allowing for, rentable space above the garage, and, or call it a mother-in-law suite or whatever. You people do that here? It's allowed? Yeah, okay.
It also depends on the neighborhood that you're in, here in Auburn. And some of the different rules and
Yeah.
what was there historically.
It's something else that helps a lot for multi-generation. Does, it's like if somebody graduates from college or they're like, "Nah, I don't quite have a job yet, or I do have a job and I'm working from home." Just had to, yeah, detached as opposed to attached.
It's like, just like one room.
Yeah, no garage. Yeah, it's literally like, if it's
Like a studio,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah, no, those are cool. Garage. On a bigger lot.
One reservation with that is that having an accessory dwelling unit like that would really facilitate game day rentals. Short term, high volume people coming in to stay. And that may not be the most desirable thing. That would be increased traffic, kind of decrease the character around game days, or however it may be. Even though ideally it would allow multi-generational family.
Yeah, we actually, after the last meeting, we talked about, Airbnb came up, game day rental, and what do we think about being here? And I think where we're at right now is that the intention is to not do that stuff. It's very, you can have it, it's very limited, very controlled. Like right now, Serenity, at the inn at Serenity, you can rent a room in the inn, or you can rent an apartment above stores in the town square, or you can rent something. So it's kind of like distributed, but it's part of their sort of rental network. It's not just willy-nilly, everybody's, "Hey, it's game day, let's all leave. We can in our whole neighborhood." Or, so that's, I think, kind of the latest thinking. So we're whatever we do, the plan is to not have it. Party.
Even bigger than game day properties, owner occupied. You see that in a lot of city, like condos and co-ops where, the building would have like some standards, rules about how many units need to be owner occupied on any given year. So you're on a board with your fellow owners, and if I've been renting my property out for years, it's like, okay, your time is up. Either it's owner occupied, you sell, keep thinking, let somebody else have a chance. Stand it.
Right.
That all these, these are tended to be owner occupied, and if for some reason you move and you want to rent your house out to somebody else.
They would be long term.
Yeah,
And, what we've seen in a higher end communities, typically the covenants, that's. Covenants and then were years ago, didn't address VRBOs because it wasn't there. And then in the longer, like, take Auburn University, for example, covenants for rent. And, people were like, hey, is there a way to change the covenants around this? Really, there was, without lawsuit. But now we're starting to see that more on the front end. But the desire of the community, at least 90% of them, like, hey, we don't really want our houses short term, and not forgot the definition. We can't do that. But anyway, I think it's just something that has to be, while I'm talking that, we've seen a lot of interest in, even on as small as maybe half acre lots, building, I guess kind of a mini version of the main house. We've seen it from in-laws, but you mentioned over the garage, we've actually, seen quite a biggest desire has been for that to be on the main level. And just on one level. And it has a little kitchen studio and one bedroom, and whatnot. So anyway, we've done a number of those, but then, it's the same for it. Definitely will work. So, right, sure.
I don't remember the term you used, but basically there's kind of an in-network.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, the idea of having like sometimes people have like a guest house, like, oh, and call up their friend, oh, so come to town. Is your guest house available? So what if you did like a guest house network, it's thought of them as guest houses in the neighborhood. It's a place where people can come if they
Yeah.
got come to town for something. It's
Somebody's having a baby, they want their mom to come in from New York. She's here for 3 weeks, why not want them to stay right in your house, but, let them get her by. I don't know. I organize it all the time for family. And there's definitely a need.
or you're doing a charrette and you have this team of planners and architects coming in. It's like, thank you for everyone whose houses we're staying in. By the way, I don't. In the house that I'm staying in, you drive past house, driveway, and garage in the back. It's just like we we're just talking about. There's the bungalow. All right.
2 things I was thinking about, I should have mentioned one during the agriculture meeting. I would love for, you're gonna laugh, I would love for us to do composting. I had that in Nashville, like so easily available to us in the city. Because we cook a lot, therefore we actually have a lot of food waste. And I just moved to Birmingham and there's like nothing like that in the city.
Yeah.
And typically in the city, someone's doing it for you, but out here, I don't know if we can have something on site and actually use it for the general store or for the produce that we're growing, but that would be like a huge request. And then also, Hayes is not here anymore, but he wanted to mention the quiet community. I think you had mentioned like no fireworks. Just general like lawn care, like non-gas powered lawn care. I feel like that would be really huge. I don't know about the actual like farming equipment, but I would really appreciate that.
Get out there. Being simple.
My headphones in and not listen to gravel crunching underneath my feet, like.
That's a nature sound thing.
Yeah. I think that might be like one of the restrictions. That would be something I would.
Or,
I was wondering about that. You don't see much of that.
You've done,
I tried to.
so it's hard to justify the cost.
geothermal HVAC, basically.
$100,000.
Right. So it works really well on like super high end estates and mansions and things like that.
House.
But you're doing, sort of on a community scale like this, like you can think about it and you can actually have, kind of I've seen some places where they'll do like a coil within a farm pond. And they're kind of have to drill down for that stuff. So there's ways to do it. It may be cost prohibitive in this market, but nonetheless, the reason I say it is because for when we were working on Alice Beach, and we're doing that as my old firm, and my old boss was talking about how he was so mad because when they did Seaside and Rosemary Beach, you're basically walking around and they make these great little walking paths and trails behind the houses and things, and it's so annoying because everybody's air compressors are cutting on, and just noisy. And so he's like, we need to do geothermal and be quiet. And so honestly, like my house sitting outside and we have a apartment over a garage. And sitting there, just having a great conversation with nature, and all of a sudden the stupid compressor with the apartment will cut on, and I'll look and see if it's there, and I'll phone and turn off the air conditioner so we can, so anyway, something to consider, but not all of it.
The point about noise, I would not want to have golf carts everywhere. I think people think it's really cool to have golf cart communities, but I don't want to live in a golf cart.
Golf carts, ATVs,
I
all
mean,
that.
I don't mind, I guess I don't mind them like being around, but like, when I, like, particularly in Auburn, when you see people use their golf cart as a car, I just find that.
So I hear that.
And I know that that's also hard to regulate, but like, kids could walk instead of cruising around on their golf cart.
Not bike rent. We have bikes available for people to ride around,
Like
like from the commercial place, like back and forth.
It's not gonna
neighborhood
be that
bikes.
big, you
Yeah.
just a walk.
Yeah. No, I'd never been on an e-assist bike until recently. Oh, it's a game changer. This is so cool,
I don't know, I don't want the liability of that. They talked to me getting on one of those electric scooters.
That's different. Yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely different. No, I'm talking about the bicycle with the little helper. But with the golf cart, it's kind of interesting. When we go to the trouble to make a walkable community, we've got trails and all this stuff, and then we're like, and by the way, you don't have to walk. You can just hop on your golf cart.
Everybody has a little
Yeah.
golf cart garage next to their real garage.
Yes. Now, that said, if they weren't of the mindset to walk or bike in the first place, they would have then probably gotten in their gas or vehicles to their electric golf cart. And, so they're, some ways the golf cart is a better alternative than being in a car.
Maybe you restrict where the golf carts.
I'm torn. I'm not sure. We have lots of
I will say down at the beach on 30A, the largest issue they've had is with the golf carts. And having to catch up with the restrictions, forcing things of that nature. So it's like on all the HOA emails, that biggest concern. Like oftentimes.
Like, isn't
Yeah.
Peachtree City
Yeah, that's like their
like
claim to fame.
notorious for like being the golf cart community, and
Yeah.
people love that it. And it's like, I feel like
Yeah, I don't know. Something to think about. I don't know if that's some places we go that like works. We did the comprehensive plan for golfing community. It's like you can people are in their golf carts like on the highway. And so of course they're golf carts, but other places,
That's 55 and older.
yeah, that's true. And
They can go.
yes, maybe there has to be an age limit or an age, the opposite of a limit.
seniors only.
Yeah, right.
Or like,
Well, and that's the other thing.
But also then it gets dangerous,
Yeah, the
because
kids
I
are
think
driving
that that's
around.
what happens. Come into a community and mom and dad have a golf cart, but then all of a sudden their 10-year-old gets access to the golf cart, and then it really just changed. I feel like there was something in the preserve a couple of years ago where there was an accident among some young kids.
That's just an enforcement thing because there are rules. uh, In any neighborhood with an HOA, they would have limits. Yeah, it's private, et cetera. In our neighborhood, people started using golf carts and they weren't supposed to have them on the road if they were street legal with the turning signals and the rearview mirrors. And so, all of a sudden the cops camped out one day in the neighborhood and whoever did the conversions to make them street legal made a lot of mess. And,
I've got a question. Talk some on the townhomes. Like I said, oftentimes in towns, there's gonna be some amenities that would share. We talked about brownstones, but you see those in places where there's access to hundreds of restaurants, museums, theaters, et cetera. Is there and I understand, I love the idea of 1,400, 1,500 square foot houses, but with the percentage of open space, unit count, I think there's a place, for, small cottages kind of cut off with a single family where you have the ability to adjust the grade, move with the grade. You're able to save a lot of trees in the great shade. And we do have an opportunity for those natural light. Then, selfishly, like as a builder, we're able to kind of move the market better, and provide more customization in that, in a single family house. So in other words, somebody wants one, we can build one. It's 5-unit townhomes. Somebody wants one.
oh, I see what you're saying, because if you're used to building for an owner, if you do townhouses, you have to have 5 owners or you're doing spec.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I'm not, against that, but I'm just, want to present that idea as saying, I think financially, even in the development side, with the land input here, not saying I know all of those numbers, just more rural, I think you could probably pull that off instead of condensing everything and then having none of open space. We might spring a little bit of that open space in there against fairly dense cottages. Perhaps as you transition from the town center, townhouses, perhaps to estate lots, somewhere in that transition.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
You have that sort of a range from the edge to the center, and it's sort of the experience changes, but from the builder's perspective, the product slash lot. 7 minutes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, and honestly, too, like I said last night at the opening presentation, I only talk about single family houses here. Way that I began this process. So, if there's an appetite for it, certainly we can explore. I think, especially for people who haven't been here all day long in these meetings and not hearing all the additional discussion and stuff, you're gonna still imagine the bad townhouses that we were kind of talking about before. Yeah. So we'll row house. Yeah, I mean that's
But
it.
maybe it's
Yeah.
not a townhouse. Consistent, to be consistent with like a little, probably see a townhouse, probably see a cottage.
Attached single family.
We really don't see like the firewalls, same price, side stuff. It's like the same, right? And then development wise, really, you have to put two layouts together to really understand it. But we really don't see a lot of development unless it's very high, pay $100,000 an acre, land, desirable, try to get it back. It's really the same lot.
Well,
You don't have to have a 150 slab.
right. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, savings ends up being that they don't have a whole lot. So they don't have to incorporate the cost of the additional land. And some people just prefer it too. So like I said, it's, when we started this yesterday.
I'm not against, I'm just, from a quantity standpoint, but I think,
These are all.
just specifically as you get a little bit further away. And share wall, sky. Your little unit. Front yard.
That's a courtyard.
Yeah.
For sure. Those are good, very practical considerations. Appreciate that. I think that as we contemplate what this ultimately is, what those desires are, I mean, the cottages you're talking about, do these little cottage courts on it, where it's like cottages on both sides facing to a little pocket park, and then streets at the edge of it. You guys have them in Auburn. Do it around here, and there are regulations that don't really allow it. What we're trying to do, I think, but I think that we figured out how we can do it. There's a thing called group development he has that essentially makes it where the grouping they would all sit on is a lot. And you basically only, restriction says you can only sell the footprint of the building, right? So you own the building and the land under just the footprint, but yeah, sort of like a horizontal kind of regime kind of thing, whatever. And so we're looking at that because we love cottage courts, people love cottage courts. Yeah, the group development things, apparently they normally use it for mobile homes, whatever. That's how they do the mobile home thing. That's not what we're trying to do. But that's the way you do it. So anyway, we're trying to get creative because, to your point, those are sort of like townhouses, separation between the units, and they have this very little pocket park. So,
It's a great community vibe for that age group too.
and the thing that's great about it is there aren't any restrictions on lot size and things. And so you could literally do what appears to be very small lots. Of course, nobody's talked about it yet, but Sarah has tiny houses.
Right.
Give them that, to y'all's point about, you may have said it, a small thing. Here, there's a street of tiny houses in Sarah. They're well done, really nice. But very small. Some people, they kind of full.
Those tiny houses, private buildings, more talk about. There's a less dollar amount, but their square foot price outrageous.
Smaller your square footage.
So, I mean, they are an option for cheap, lower price top houses, but it's gonna be, a lot cheaper.
So if somebody's looking, if they're coming in and they're saying, oh. But if they're saying, here's my budget, and it's like, okay, well, I should put in the budget, or good way to get in. And people, again, some people live small by choice, not even work by budget.
And there's some pretty cool cab homes too. That are cost high quality.
I mean, build
Prefab,
like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some, I mean, I know a friend of mine who's an architect. She's been involved. That way, I mean, it would be a different aesthetic, but it could also be put in a certain area where it doesn't mesh with.
they'd have to be the same. Figure out how to make it.
I mean, I think there's a way to make a more traditional farmhouse look though with a modern look too.
I'm
It
thinking,
goes back to just design, aesthetic. Having several wall, but still we're under the use when you drive down the road. But yes, I agree. You can like take the same materials, colors, and that's perfect.
Whether it's built offsite or onsite, it's the relevant loan.
We
Yeah.
usually, I think, outside.
Especially when you got the big builders, right?
What I was picturing when we were talking about like a set of townhomes, you have the cottages, these developments, like tall or 1 or 2 story narrow lots. So you get the narrow lot feel. But that's where you can incorporate more of the brownstone aesthetic. Like, I mean, these aren't particularly brownstone, but if you look at those, the Waverly Local and where common area used to be, you have that space in between where it looks like a building's taken out. And that's now a pavilion and shared space. And so something like that, it takes that big block of 150-foot townhome and makes it permeable, and you can see through it. You have trees, landscape.
I think that's a good strategy, sure. So ultimately too, said earlier, not having too many, because in a real urban place, you have gaps. Rural place, or gaps you have, landscape to come in and to separate and break that street wall. I mean, I would imagine that if you had anything like that, it's like a handful.
So nobody's speaking up, but there's literally signs up there, so it's no problem.
Oh, okay.
So,
Oh, okay.
Whatever, I don't think it's gonna take for a lot of time, especially not the church.
I don't have an.
Yeah.
I would think that if they want to live, don't want a narrow lot. That's a very suburban, like, feel to it. But the type of however, I think that all rather than lots of homes don't share all or home like, to the point about cottages. I think maybe it's a topography better aspect. Trying to put suburban would be more.
So maybe you put the smaller homes as more like cottages, more integrated with the landscape, farther away from the city.
Area between them and it. There's not the hill, a big white townhouse shaped building there. So that cottage court definitely did nothing. Super. So I think ultimately, if we consider this, I'll need to show y'all some things to consider to see if anybody thinks. But like I said, it's not something we planning to do at the beginning, so if it, okay. We heard it last night.
We haven't talked about large lots.
No one cares.
Yeah,
Not everyone.
yeah.
Large lot. No one cares about it. No one's concerned about it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's
Large lot. Referencing.
What's a large lot?
I mean, I'm gonna leave that to them, but I'm kind of curious about that as well. I I don't know.
Is there a way to like do a 10 acre lot and 5 acres left is that count as a green space?
Figuring out what. They just might have been, got here by briefly, online.
Okay.